It's coming up to 10 minutes to the hour. This is Paris Live PM on Radio France International. Let's turn our focus now to Iraq and to the ongoing battle to retake Mosul, the country's second largest city, from Islamic State militants. After 4 months of fighting, a new chapter is opening in the fight to retake the western part of Mosul. The eastern side was liberated last month, but military officials say the west, with its narrower, winding alleyways, could prove a bigger challenge. With us to discuss this is France 24 journalist Robert Parsons, who has been to the Mosul front lines during the first phase to capture the east from Islamic State. You're very welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, first let's set the scene for this battle. The west is where the old city is, where the ancient souks are. It's where the Al-Nuri Mosque is located, where Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi made his only public appearance, declaring the existence of the caliphate. It's densely populated. Tell us, how is the battle changing from when Iraqi forces took the east?
Well, so far it hasn't changed a great deal because they haven't penetrated into the western part of the city. They're on the outskirts of the city at the moment, going through the country villages and making relatively rapid progress. It rather resembles the situation when they launched their attack on the east of Mosul back in October, November. That in the early period of the attack, they made quite rapid progress going through the small villages. And there was sort of a sense of, oh, this is going to be rather easier than we thought, until they got into Mosul proper and started getting into street fighting and realizing how complicated it was going to be, particularly as a large part of the population of Mosul had remained in place. Now, that's going to be exactly the same this time round as well when they start going into western Mosul, but with the added problem that, as you pointed out, the streets tend to be smaller and windier. And in addition to that, there's a much larger percentage of the population in western Mosul is sympathetic to the Islamic State group than was the case in eastern Mosul. So that's a factor that they're going to have to calculate into their equation as well, and will complicate things as they move forward.
Now, that's an interesting point that you make there. Many of the IS fighters are themselves from Mosul, so they know the streets, they know the lay of the land, they have friends there. Isn't this the showdown they've been waiting for?
Well, perhaps one could have surmised that to begin with, but the battle hasn't gone well for them. They've had a lot of casualties in eastern Mosul. They may have started out, the calculations vary, perhaps 6,000, perhaps 7,000 fighters. It's thought that maybe as many as 4,000 of them have been killed already. So maybe there are 2,000, maybe 3,000 left in western Mosul. So it's not a battle that they can win. It's a battle that they can inflict serious casualties on the Iraqi army and to some extent demoralize the Iraqi army. But this is a losing battle for the Islamic State.
So what sort of tactics are they using to stave off the Iraqi forces?
Well, the tactics are exactly the same as they used in eastern Mosul. They've been there for a couple of years. As you pointed out, many of them come from Mosul. They know their way around the city. In western Mosul in particular, they have the sympathy of a large part of the population. But they've also had time to prepare their defences. And they're using the same traditional defences that they had in eastern Mosul. In other words, roadside bombs, underground tunnels, suicide bombers, suicide car bombs, which were lethal in the attack on eastern Mosul. But the tactics of the Iraqi army have evolved as well to deal with the problem. The equipment they're using now to counter those sort of suicide bomb attacks, car bomb attacks, are much more effective than they were before. And although they are taking a toll, not to the same degree as they were a few months ago.
Tell us, what does Mosul mean to the Islamic State? It's been said that losing its capital, its heartland, will present it with somewhat of an existential challenge, incomparable to any loss that it suffered over the past few years.
Yes, I think that's probably true. I mean, Mosul is the heart of the caliphate, this idea of an Islamic territory run according to Islamic law. If they lose Mosul, all they'll have left in terms of urban conurbations will be Raqqa in Syria. Nothing in Iraq worth talking about. So it will be a major blow. As you pointed out, it's where al-Baghdadi was based for a while. It's where he made that speech that you referred to from the mosque in western Mosul. So there's no doubt that in terms of the prestige of the Islamic State organization, to lose Mosul would be a very severe blow indeed, which is why they're putting up such fierce defense. Once they lose the idea of the caliphate, a territorial expanse which they rule according to Islamic law, the specific attraction of Islamic State starts to disintegrate. It's what makes the Islamic State stand out from all the other jihadist groups that are out there. It's what has appealed to so many people in Western Europe and elsewhere who've wanted to go and join the Islamic State. Remove that, defeat the Islamic State territorially, and all that's left is another jihadist group.
Now, fears have been voiced for the civilians in western Mosul, a very densely populated area. I think the estimate is something like 700,000 people trapped there. What efforts are being made to protect them and to stop their homes from becoming targets?
Well, as you say, it's an enormously difficult task. And militarily, it's something that the Iraqi army is going to struggle with. As we were saying earlier on, it's much more densely packed than Eastern Mosul. Eastern Mosul was also extremely difficult. I spent quite a lot of time with Iraqi troops as they were trying to push into Eastern Mosul. And one thing that they kept saying over and over again is, we can't do what we want to do, because if we do that, there will be definitely severe civilian casualties. So we have to be extremely careful. It's going to be even more complicated for them because of the density of the population in Western Mosul. It means, for instance, that one of the main advantages that the Iraqi forces have, air power, is very difficult to use, because it's very difficult to be so precise in built-up areas like that.
I suppose another problem in this conflict is, why IS was able to rise in the first place. It is a Sunni insurgency. It was able to make gains because Sunnis in Iraq felt oppressed. They were unhappy with the Shiite government. How will the Sunni inhabitants of Mosul be feeling towards their Shiite liberators?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's something that the Iraqi army, as I saw it, is very conscious of at the moment. The history of relations between the Iraqi army and predominantly Sunnite populations over the last couple of years has not been particularly good. But in the build-up to Mosul, it seems like an effort was made to drum into the armed forces that they have to have a good relationship with the people of the city when they moved into Mosul. And in eastern Mosul, the impression I got speaking to the people of the city as they were coming out, as we interviewed them, was that the relationship thus far had been pretty good. We'll see what it's going to be like in Western Mosul, where, as I was saying earlier on, there is greater sympathy for the Islamic State organization. That could put a real test on that relationship. And there's no doubt that when you watch the Iraqi army going into some of these areas, they look like not a national army, but a Shiite army, because they go with all their Shiite banners flying from their tanks and from their armored personnel carriers and their Humvees and so on. And I suppose if you were a Sunni inhabitant of Western Mosul and you saw them coming, you would definitely be intimidated. So there's a real problem they've got to deal with there to reassure the people of Western Mosul that they don't mean the civilian population any harm.
And just briefly, we've really only got about 20 seconds left, but do you envisage seeing a power vacuum in this region once the battle's over?
Well, that's going to be one of the big problems, because although, as you pointed out correctly, Mosul is a predominantly Sunni city, it's also a city of many minorities who want to protect their interests. There are Christians, there are Yazidis, there are Kurds, there are Sunnites and Shiites. That's going to be one of the biggest problems, satisfying everybody's concerns.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Our thanks there to France 24 journalist Robert Parsons.